A quorum being present, I call to order a brief business meeting of the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry before we get started with today's hearing. The purpose of this hearing is to organize the committee for the 119th Congress. To do so, we will consider adoption of the committee's rules, funding resolution, and the membership rosters for each subcommittee. All of these materials have been provided to committee members ahead of today's meeting. At this time, a motion would be in order to adopt these items in block.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The committee's rules, funding resolution, and subcommittee assignments are adopted, and the business meeting is adjourned. Very good. I'm delighted now to call the hearing to order, and I would like to thank our witnesses for being here today. Thank you for leaving your farms and families to travel to Washington to share your experiences with us. As a proud Arkansan, I'm delighted to have Nathan Reed and Jennifer James here on today's second panel. This hearing is the first in our series of the committee that we will be holding on the current state of America's rural economy from the perspective of our farmers, ranchers, and rural leaders. These hearings are intended to help inform our decisions as we draft a new farm bill and to ensure we are putting forward policies that will help current and future generations of farm families survive and ultimately thrive in a very unpredictable world. Every member of this committee has heard directly from farmers in their states about the current difficulties that they face. I've been blessed to join members of the committee to be part of some of these conversations, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue. High interest rates, elevated production costs, and depressed commodity prices, coupled with a frayed safety net worn out over time, have left many producers exposed to financial ruin. Since 2022, producers have lost more than $50 billion in net income, and net farm income is forecast to continue to decline. Farmers are experiencing a scenario where there is no room for error. Farm families are looking for the next generation and trying to determine if this career that requires more sacrifice than most careers is viable. I fear that across the country, we are at risk of losing untold numbers of family farms. Recently, the Agriculture and Food Policy Center of Texas A&M University stated that, quote, in 42 years that the Food Center has been projecting farm financial performance, the most recent crop outlook for the representative farms is the worst in terms of the number of farms in each of the four commodity types, feed grains, cotton, rice, and wheat, that are not currently expected to have a positive cash flow over the next 5 years, end quote. My highest priority for the next farm bill is to improve the farm safety net, whereby every farmer in every region will have access to modernized risk management tools regardless of the commodity that they grow. If we fail to modernize the safety net, agriculture will see further consolidation as farm families leave the business, and the ripple effects to our country will be truly profound. The task before us is great. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses, and I now turn to Ranking Member Klobuchar for opening comments.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Senator Boozman. Thank you to our incredible group of witnesses, including some from the state of Minnesota. And I especially want to welcome Mr. Duvall and Mr. Larew. Most importantly, your street creds are you've both been to Minnesota's Farm Fest, so we thank you for that. I join the chairman in appreciating the work this committee has done so far, and we've gotten to a good, strong bipartisan support. our nation's farmers to continue to produce the world's safest and most abundant food supply. We know that our farmers take on significant risks and operate on razor-thin margins to feed America and the world, and it is our job to make sure that continues. I have heard consistently from Minnesota farmers that they need certainty, and part of that certainty, of course, as we all know, is getting a farm bill in place. There's changes we need to make from last Farm Bill to make it even better. And our committee has an opportunity at a time when we've got high input costs, where we've got avian flu, we have an opportunity to pass a bipartisan farm bill and deliver that certainty. A strong farm bill, of course, requires a coalition of farm, food, research, rural nutrition and conservation interests, things we care deeply about. Farmers depend on all parts of the Farm Bill, from energy programs that create new markets to research to dealing with emerging threats. And we are ready to work with all of our colleagues to get that done. I do want to take a moment to talk about what happened this past week when we're talking about certainty. I am very concerned about the administration's first moves on tariffs. While I support targeted tariffs, like many on this committee, I have serious concerns about sweeping across-the-board tariffs that threaten our farmers' livelihoods. Both the American Farm Bureau and the National Farmers Union have expressed concerns about the tariffs and how they could lead to financial hardships for U.S. farmers and ranchers, and of course, create higher prices for consumers. Across-the-board tariffs open American farmers to retaliatory tariffs, and we've seen this before. And as I said in my opening at our nomination hearing for Brooke Rollins, what our farmers want is fair trade and not aid. They want trade, not aid. And this would be a major problem if we look at the results of this. The decision to impose 25% tariffs, which as we know is now on pause for a short period of time, on Canada and Mexico, even if delayed 30 days, could increase costs for inputs like fertilizer, just as they're trying to plan for an upcoming season. A tariff on Canadian potash could increase fertilizer costs by as much as $1.70 an acre for corn and $1.42 an acre for soybeans. American farmers have worked for decades thanks to these two gentlemen and many behind them, to improve their international market access. We have been able to find common ground in this committee on this issue, such as the market promotion funding and the recent initiative launched by USDA. We need to build on, not roll back, this progress. A strong farm safety net, as pointed out by Senator Boozman, include Title I programs and crop insurance, and they are our farmers' most effective tools in managing uncertainty. But right now, unfortunately, with some of the confusion over this funding freeze and the OMB memo that was then rescinded in 24 hours, but then other statements from the White House, we have heard from farmers unable to access these critical resources. Last Congress, Senator Thune and I worked on the Crop Insurance for Future Farmers Act to give beginning and veteran farmers more affordable crop insurance protection. And this effective tool is important, and we don't want to take it away in the middle of what I consider chaos. Extreme weather patterns make the need for a strong safety net even more urgent, and the effects of climate change. Minnesota farmers have recorded nearly $1 billion in crop insurance indemnities for 2024 losses due to extreme weather, including droughts and floods. To address these challenges, Congress added significant funding to USDA's popular voluntary conservation programs. USDA also launched a commodities initiative to provide new market opportunities for our nation farmers. The future of these programs is uncertain, and I think it's very important to see this. Many of us may have different political lenses, but to see it from an ag standpoint. We've heard from farmers who have purchased tens of thousands of dollars in cover crop seed only to receive notice that disbursements for these costs are paused. As many of my colleagues have expressed, and you will hear from today, we remain deeply troubled by the administration's pause on conservation support for farmers, and we would like to make sure that we reduce this chaos and makes it easier for our farmers to do their good work. This committee has always provided a venue for coming together, Democrats and Republicans, to support our farmers in rural America. I know from our personal friendship that Chairman Boozman and I, and in our committee hearings so far, want that to continue in a very strong way. We're excited about the committee and the incredible members on this committee, and we want to do right by our farmers and the people of this country that depend on them. I look forward to hearing from the testimony of the witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Very well said. We will now introduce the first panel of witnesses, and Senator Warnock.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Zippy Duvall. He is the president of the American Farm Bureau Federation, where he has served as president since 2016. Mr. Duvall is a third-generation farmer from Georgia, Greensboro, where he and his son operate a beef cow herd. They raise broiler chickens, and they grow their own hay, all while maintaining Georgia farmland that has been in their family for more than 90 years. Farming is in his bloodstream. Mr. Duvall has been a consistent and reliable leader, championing Georgia's agriculture community through the ups and downs of an often unpredictable business. Zippy, as we call him, has seen it all, including responding to natural disasters, supply chain disruptions, and inflationary pressures, with the focus of making sure farmers and ranchers in Georgia and across the country have the support that they need from all of us on this panel and elected officials across Georgia and across our country. Prior to being elected American Farm Bureau president, he was president of the Georgia Farm Bureau and served on the American Farm Bureau Board of Directors. Thank you, Zippy, for being with us today to speak on behalf of farmers from Georgia and across the country. We know you do hard work with slim margins, and we're grateful. I often say that farmers are an answer to a prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. It's an honor to represent Georgians like you, and I look forward to hearing from you today, as I'm sure all of my colleagues.
Senator Justice.
Okay, guys, thank you so much, and it's a big honor for me to do this, but, thank you so much. It's quite an honor for me to introduce Rob Larew. I've got to tell you just this, and this is just so simple, but years ago, this gentleman and everything was buying wet corn from us. And he has a great farm in Greenville, West Virginia. And get this now, that farm has been in their family, is that correct, since 1798. It is amazing, absolutely amazing. And so as this man graduated from Virginia Tech. He has served the last 5 years as the president of the National Farmers Union, which represents 230,000 family farmers and ranchers across rural America. He is a man of many, many, many talents. And Rob, we had a past acquaintance and now a new acquaintance and everything. But I thank you so much for all you've done. I cherish all the great stuff that your family's done. And get this is all within a rock's throw of the farm where we started. We started our farming operation in 1977 and grew it to a point where we were absolutely, I think, the largest cash grain farmers east of the Mississippi River. So we started with almost nothing and grew and grew and grew. With all that being said, this man was a part of my life, and I'm privileged to say I was a part of his life as well. He's a real deal. And so, Rob, we thank you so much for being here. We're really interested in what you have to say today, and I promise you I'll really pay attention. Thank you so much.
That's a good promise. You can't beat that.
something for all of us to remember.
We're going to go a little bit out of sequence in the sense that Senator Durbin's here and is going to introduce Mr. Hartman. There's just so much going on right now. You're going to have a lot of people going back and forth. Senator Durbin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for accommodating me, and I may not be here for the formal introduction of the second panel. And I just want to tell you, my friend Kenny Hartman used to be the president of the Illinois Corn Growers. He has been promoted. He is now the president of the National Corn Growers Association from Waterloo, Illinois. And welcome, Kenny. Thanks for being here today.
Very good. Mr. Duvall, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Senator, and Chairman Bozeman and Ranking Member Klobuchar and other distinguished guests, especially my senator from Georgia, and thank you for that introduction. And I'm focused on Jesus today. Also want to thank Rob here. Rob and I have become good friends over the years and work together constantly, making sure that farmers' voices are being heard. I am Zippy Duvall, president of American Farm Bureau, and my son and I still do farm in Georgia. I spent 30 years dairying, so all of you know what a dairyman's life is like. And I thought I'd never find a job that was more difficult than dairy, but I might have found it. So the farm families across the country are grateful for you recognizing the incredible hard times across agricultural economy when you included a much-needed economic assistance and emergency aid for communities that was destroyed by natural disasters, and you incorporated that in your CR during December. Despite the assistance of the CR, farmers are looking to you to pass a modernized 5-year farm bill as soon as possible. Our farmers also face challenges related to their region, their weather, trade barriers, crop protection, and all of these will be addressed in my written testimony. As Congress begins to work on a 2025 Farm Bill, Farm Bureau supports the following principles to guide and develop the programs. First one is to increase the baseline funding commitments in the farm programs. Maintain a unified farm bill and that includes nutrition programs and farm programs together because they belong together. Prioritize funding for risk management tools, which include crop insurance and commodity programs. Now, the USDA's most recent farm sector income forecast has shown a $41 billion decrease in net farm income. That's down 25% from 2022. Since crop prices peaked in 2022, they have taken a nosedive. Corn and wheat are down 37%, soybeans down 28%, cotton down 22%. And despite these lower prices, 2024 payments out of the Farm Bill going to farmers are projected to be the lowest since 1982, over 4 decades ago. This again highlights the need for increased coverage in Title I programs. We also can't imagine during a time of great economic uncertainty that farmers and ranchers and many small businesses across the country are anticipating what might be the largest tax increase in America's history. Failing to extend the expiring provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act would take billions of dollars out of our farmers' pockets where they have no spare money anyway. Congress must find a way to create a stable business environment by making the expiring provisions permanent. Now, I also believe it's important that the committee recognize that the greatest domestic policy threat to American agriculture is our outdated guest worker program and the labor crisis farmers are facing across the country. In short, the cost is too high, domestic willingness to work on our farms is way too low, and farm families are shutting down their farms. And this is heartbreaking and has direct and tangible impacts on our rural communities. While I know it's not under the jurisdiction of this committee, labor is by far the leading issue that I hear talked about and discussed and I get asked about by farmers and ranchers across the country, regardless of region or commodity. Finally, this week we've seen many actions around trade with additional tariffs being imposed on our largest trading partners. I want to assure this committee that Farm Bureau will continue to be the voice of American agriculture and its farmers to pursue and advocate for new markets and additional market access for agricultural products. Thank you, Senators. Thank you for this opportunity to be here today, and I really look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Duvall. Mr. Larew.
All righty. Thank you, and thank you, Senator Justice, for the kind introduction. I'm sure I remember that when we bought that corn, that our milk production probably went straight up. Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, members of the committee, as the sixth generation on the farm in West Virginia, I am really proud to be here representing family farmers and ranchers across the country. According to the Census of Agriculture, we lost a staggering 140,000 farms in the last 5 years. The average farmer is now nearly 60 years old. The next generation is too often locked out. The uncertain future of the farm and rural economy adds to anxiety in farm country. At the same time, farmers and ranchers receive only 15 cents on average of every food dollar. Consumers are paying higher prices at the store, while family farmers and ranchers are dealing with tight margins, few market options, and increased financial pressure. We must confront these challenges head on. We applaud the committee for quickly taking action this year to hear from us. The stakes are high, not just for farmers and ranchers, but for all the communities that rely on us. Passing a strong farm bill is a great place to start. We appreciated the efforts of Chairman Bozeman and many other committee leaders at the end of last year to ensure the passage of disaster assistance. We cannot afford a third extension of the 2018 Farm Bill. Congress must act quickly to pass a fully funded Farm Bill in 2025. This farm bill should include strengthening the farm safety net and providing farmers with robust risk management tools, investing in voluntary incentive-based conservation programs, supporting the next generation of farmers, and keeping the Farm Bill coalition together. But a strong Farm Bill alone is not enough. We also need open and fair agricultural markets. Farmers are the backbone of this country, but too often we're being taken advantage of. As farmers, we love competition, but often our only option is to buy from or sell to monopolies, resulting in higher costs, fewer choices, and less innovation. We're not asking for a guarantee, we're just asking for a fair shot. We have opportunities to make the system work for farmers by protecting and strengthening the Packers and Stockyards Act, supporting mandatory country of origin labeling, like the American Beef Labeling Act, led by Majority Leader Thune, and ensuring that farmers have, finally, full and complete freedom to repair their own equipment. In addition to fairness at home, we must also consider fairness in global trade. American family farmers are often the first to suffer from trade disputes. Tariffs can be powerful when used in a smart way, but we've also seen what happens when Washington gets it wrong. Farm income drops, markets disappear, and costs go up. Congress should focus on expanding domestic and global markets, holding trade partners accountable, and ensuring that trade policies are applied carefully to protect and not harm American farmers and ranchers. Finally, recent executive actions are creating concern for farmers and communities. No one knows what funding will be available or if key programs will have the staff needed to operate. Freezing spending and making sweeping decisions without congressional oversight just adds more uncertainty to an already tough farm economy. We encourage this committee to seek clarity from the administration and make sure that farmers and rural communities aren't left behind. In closing, the challenges facing farmers and ranchers across the country are daunting, but not insurmountable. A strong farm bill, fair markets, and smart policies can ensure that the next generation has opportunities in agriculture. Farmers Union is ready to work with you to make that a reality and deliver solutions that will give farmers a fair shot. The last few months I've traveled across the country visiting with family farmers about their challenges, and I look forward to sharing some of those stories as we answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, thank both of you for being here. Let me ask you about two or three things. I'll give them to you all at once, and then you can kind of digest them and respond. Mr. Duvall, Mr. Root, as you engage with farmers and ranchers across the country, and both of y'all are so great, you're out and about as much as anybody, what on-farm decisions are you seeing families make as they prepare for the third consecutive year without a modernized farm safety net? That's one thing. And then along with that, can you elaborate on what you see happening in farm country if the committee does not properly prioritize and increase funding for the risk management tools? And then lastly, along with that, can you describe the role you see crop insurance playing for farmers? You've got diverse memberships within your organizations. What are you hearing regarding crop insurance improvements? If you can just touch on that for a few minutes. Zippy?
Well, thank you, Senator, for your question. Decision making on the farm, because we're not having a farm bill, is being very difficult for our farmers, because we know without a modernized farm bill, and the 18 farm bill was a good farm bill, but we've experienced inflation, COVID, so many cost of production going up, so many things have happened. We're in a different environment today, and y'all mentioned that in your open statements. But we are hearing that maybe 20% or more of our farmers are going to have difficulties getting operating loans, and we're in a time where that should have already been done, and they should have the seed in the barn ready to start planting, and it's really hitting them at a hard, difficult time. They are telling us they're losing money per acre, corn over $100 an acre losing. They're having to make decisions which crops plant, which crop not to plant. If I'm not going to plant, do I let that rented land go and miss the opportunity to have it in the future and someone else rent it? So there's so many decisions they're having to make. And, and I get the question all the time, Senator, about what word keeps me up at night. And what keeps me up at night is who's going to farm in the future. 40% of the farmers out there today is over retirement age. 300,000 or less than 25 years old, and most of them have off-the-farm jobs to support their habit of farming. And I don't know who's going to be farming in the future if we don't make an environment for in agriculture that draws young people to us that can afford to raise a family and create a home in rural communities and support that economy there. That's why the Farm Bill is so important. Now, the risk management tools, the crop insurance is the cornerstone of the Farm Bill, and it needs to be continued. It is where farmers have skin in the game and pay for a premium, and the general public has skin in the game through subsidy of the premium to make sure that our food system stays secure from one season to the next because of lower prices or because of natural disasters or whatever might be happening. It is the cornerstone. The need in that area is we need every farmer, regardless of whether he's organic, traditional, big, small, large, every farmer that takes that risk needs some kind of risk management tool, and crop insurance has proven itself over and over again to be that tool to make sure that they can survive those difficulties. And I think I hit all three of your points.
No, very good. Thank you, Mr. Larew.
Yeah. First of all, Zippy and I were joking a little bit before that you're going to hear a lot of the same themes, right? The fact is that as we go around and we talk to farmers across the country, there are just endless kind of examples of folks, both who are well-established farmers and those who are trying to make a go at it, but in the first few years. And the challenges are really kind of make and break for a lot of them at this point. I think about a couple of cotton growers who have been farming for years, who, when trying to seek an operating loan right now, after 3 years of drought and low prices, are now facing really tough decisions, and the bank doesn't know whether or not they're going to be able to extend that loan. As they are having that tough conversation, it's also really apparent that these community banks, including the ones that they were talking to, are also really struggling out there. And so as they try to see whether or not they can get the loan going forward, the bank is also trying to make that tough decision. Can we afford additional risk on top? I also think about a young farmer in North Dakota who was recently sharing experience about trying to get more land, to rent more ground, to expand operations, and in doing that, had to invest in some new equipment. And as a result of that is now, unfortunately, with prices overextended, and is now having to sell on pennies on the dollar that farm equipment, and is seeking now to still pay off the loan, the financing for that, and doesn't know whether or not farming is in his future. These are really just the kind of stories, whether it's the more established folks who are eating through their equity and putting their operations at risk, or new and beginning farmers who don't have yet that deep well of experience and equity that they can burn right now. So those needs for risk management tools, including crop insurance, are absolutely essential. I hope that as the committee considers what to include in the Farm Bill, that looking for ways to not only strengthen the existing options there, but look for additional ways to help support beginning farmers with that, and also creative ways to bring more into those risk management tools. I think that would be a great place to start.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I will ask at another time. I appreciated you raising, Mr. Duvall, the ag labor issues, which I think, while you are right, we may not have jurisdiction over immigration on this committee, we can be a voice when it comes to farm labor. And thank you for your comments, Mr. Larew, on consolidation. So just over the weekend, the president announced 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Just talked about them. Additionally, 10% tariffs on China. Those went into effect yesterday. And even though the implementations of the tariffs on Canada and Mexico have been delayed for 30 days, it's created incredible uncertainty in farm country. Both of your organizations put out statements on Friday raising major alarms on the potential implications of the tariffs on farmers. And I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to put those letters on the record. To both of you, the Canadian government announced a long slate of U.S. products that would be subject to retaliatory tariffs if these went into effect, including baked goods, fresh fruit and vegetables, ethanol, dairy products. Canada has been a billion dollar plus market for all these products. How will this retaliation and associated market impacts affect the farmers that you represent? Okay. Mr. Larew.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I would start first with not only the potential implications of these tariffs in place, but the real kind of experience that we're hearing out there about suppliers of fertilizer and other goods who are already adding costs onto goods that we're buying. We're hearing some places that are not selling for delivery products beyond a certain date because of the threat of the talent. So I think, first of all, there's the very real kind of challenges right now. I was just in Columbus, Indiana, talking to a farmer who the whole time we were talking was on the phone trying to get product across the Canadian border before any potential threat there. Meanwhile, costs were going up. So I think that the threat brings real impact, and certainly we just have the last experience that we have with China to kind of look at the combination of things from lost markets, increased cost, adding to already kind of increased inflation and so forth. So the costs are many and across the board.
Okay, and I just, to add a little bit here, Mr. Duvall, a recent study, depending on the type of retaliation with the loss in value for this is from Corn Growers and Soybean Association, for just their crops ranged between $4.8 billion and $7.4 billion. And we would be losing market share to competitors in Brazil and Argentina. And that's just as a result of the tariffs in China alone. Could you just talk about the long-term damage you could do with trading partners, that even the uncertainty of all this, and they're just going to go look for products in other countries?
Senator, you said it very well, and that's been one of the concerns we expressed is the potential of shrinking the markets because countries and companies can just decide to go buy it elsewhere where they have reliability to the market and don't have the access to it. And we do see our competitors in Brazil continue to do the wrong things to expand their production down there to compete with us, and it makes it very difficult on our farmers anyway. So the shrinkage of the market, we need more access, not less. We need more fair trade deals, not less. We need this administration, because we haven't seen it for almost a decade now, really getting fair trade deals to be put in place and stick with good rules and keep people working under it. The other issue is the cost of production. I think you said it yourself. Over 80% of the potash comes out of Canada, and that goes on our cropland, and that would be devastating to our farmers. Just that one example is difficult for our farmers.
Thank you.
You know, we're very appreciative of the president and his negotiation skills, and he has proven himself right in the past in the first administration and had some success, and we're looking forward to having more success. But we're very appreciative of his negotiation going on now to be able to delay it for 30 days and see if we can bring some common sense solutions to these problems, because we need less interruptions in the supply system, because it's our job to create a food system for our people in this country that they can afford and it's reliable. We do not want to go back to the days and interrupt this food system like we saw during COVID. And there's several things going on right now that could cause that.
Thanks. I just want to get one more question here. Mr. Larew, we have heard from a lot of your members that there's some difficulty in accessing the conservation program. This is something that Congress had, you know, Article 1, we had actually set up these programs. What would be the implications of slowing down these programs for farmers, and really the same when it comes to nutrition in terms of making sure as we go forward that those programs remain strong? Mr. Larew.
Yeah, we're taking stories from all across the country of producers who are certainly dealing with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of expenses that they are due to be reimbursed because they had a commitment and a contract for certain activities with USDA. So they've made that investment. We've all talked about tight margins. I think it's worth just highlighting the fact that in many cases, some farms, it's actually a negative margin. It's that all-farm income that covers it. And so having at this this really critical phase right now of that economic pressure, having USDA delayed with a lot of uncertainty about whether or not it will actually come through is adding to that economic pressure in the countryside.
Thank you.
Senator McConnell.
Let's stay on the subject of tariffs. Most people don't think of bourbon as a agricultural product, but in fact, it is. To give you an idea of how the Canadians are already reacting to the potential of a trade war, there's stories about taking American bourbon off the shelves already to send us a message. My view is if the threatening of imposing tariffs produces something and you don't actually do it, maybe there's an argument for them. But what I worry about, and I know all of us up here are concerned about it, what happens to the $3 billion that we export from Kentucky every year? And I can't think of any part of the American economy that's more dependent on international relationships and trade than agriculture. So my question is, and it's not unique, I think it's already been asked and maybe adequately addressed by you, if we actually get into a trade war, and by the way, remember everybody that the current trade relationship between Canada and Mexico was negotiated by this administration before and bragged about. But obviously, that seems not to be enough. And so here we are on the cusp of getting into this. If we do, what happens to American agriculture?
So the president, in his first term, always said he loved his farmer and he'd stand behind him. He made that commitment to me verbally, and he did. But our farmers want to have open markets. They don't want payments. Of course, in the instance where we are being harmed, for the protection of our food system, for the protection of our national security through our food system, we have to look outside of open markets and do something to make sure our farmers can survive the trade war. But that's not exactly what we want. We want the markets themselves. But this president's delivered that the first time, and we've had a seat at the table with him, and we look forward to continuing to communicate with him on those issues. But it could be devastating to agriculture if we're not paying attention to what happens. And not just agriculture. I'm here to represent agriculture, but we're here representing rural communities and the consumer of our products, which is the American people. And it's going to affect the availability of it, it's going to affect the cost of it, and it's going to affect the way we can do business at home on our farms.
Thank you, Senator. Just building on Zippy's remarks, because I certainly echo a lot of what he just said here. Our reliability as a trading partner out there is certainly at major risk in this situation. And I think that we are still, certainly in some commodities, feeling the effects of the last trade war that we had. With also, even as our members at their grassroots policymaking process recognize that the use of tariffs strategically can, as you pointed out, achieve some results. But knowing that we stand on the front lines of some of that retaliation really puts a lot of things at risk, and would just restate the fact that we want competition. We want to receive our income from the fair and open market, not just payments.
Isn't it true, one more, Mr. Chairman, if I may, isn't it true that many historians looking at the 1930s thought the Smoot-Hawley trade war exacerbated the Great Depression? You guys are not familiar with that?
Not going to speak on it, but
Not in your lane, huh? Well,
Senator, I may be old, but I'm not quite that old, but my grandfather told me it was very difficult.
yeah, well, there were a lot of things that contributed to the Depression, but that was widely thought by historians of that particular period as contributing to the economic problems not only that we had, but others around the world had. Thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. It's very good to see both of you. I want to say to the leader before he leaves, to Leader McConnell, the good news is that the product that he has from his Commonwealth that he's worried about is of deep concern to states all over the United States of America, and is the lubrication of our democracy and our economy in many ways. So I think that a lot of people feel his pain. And I also want to mention somebody that I know, Jim Ehrlich, who's from the San Luis Valley in Colorado, who we were celebrating yesterday his retirement as the head of Colorado's Potato Council, where he has fought for years and years and years to open markets for potato growers in our state, in Mexico and other places. You know of his successes. You know of their successes. It's a reminder of why this trade discussion is not academic or theoretical or ideological for our farmers and ranchers. It's something they are working on every single day, because it is the only place, at least for the producers in Colorado, where at least in the medium term, we're going to see any growth, which is expanding our export markets for our folks. And it's also not theoretical, because we know, as Mr. Larew said, that in the last round of these tariffs, in the last round of this trade war, according to USDA, it cost agriculture $27 billion. And agriculture doesn't want to be paid, as Mr. Duvall said, or Mr. Larew said, through these payments. That's not how they want to be paid. They want to be paid because they're producing and they're selling in markets around the world. And my curiosity for you is why agriculture is the focus of our adversaries around the world in terms of their response to trade barriers, like the ones that are being threatened by the United States right now. Why is American agriculture where they are likeliest to retaliate if that's how we approach it, just as China did the last time, just as we're seeing Canada and Mexico do this time? And is it because they understand how tough our producers have it already, one, and two, what it means for families, and Zippy, you mentioned a little bit about what it means for families who are at the grocery store right now already facing higher prices. Could the two of you address that?
Well, in terms of why they are doing it, I think you raise a number of really important pieces. Probably need to speak to the trading partners themselves on exactly the cause, but I think that the impacts that we know are likely to happen, the economic stress, as you highlighted, really across agriculture, and the dependence that a lot of our not only value-added products, but also commodities out there are absolutely dependent, not only on exporting, but also on being able to receive inputs from a variety of places. So having that kind of combination of increased costs for farming and then also lower prices for our products is a double whammy.
Senator, historically, we've always been the first one to hit. And I think, and this is just my opinion, you asked my opinion, it's the most essential thing in life. We think this is important. It's the first thing we pick up.
Actually, I'd like to throw mine and yours in the Potomac River, but go ahead.
When I retire, you're
That's
not going to be
another
able to find
top,
me.
yeah.
But, you know, we think it's the most essential thing, but we can't even accept what comes out of it if we don't have the nourishment to run our bodies. And I think if you look across this country, in most states, agriculture is the leading industry in that state, and it supports the economy of this country and every community across this country.
That's well said. That's true in Colorado, and I think, as the chairman said and as the ranking member said, our farmers are feeling stressed for all kinds of reasons already, you know, not the least of which is we haven't gotten a farm bill passed. But to add this on top of everything else is the last thing they need. With the last 20 seconds, I just also wanted to respond, Mr. Duvall, to what you said about farm labor. I want to just underscore, you said it's the #1 issue facing the people that you're representing, and this is something that we've worked on a long time here. You and I have had a lot of conversations about it over the years, and you know, I have been very clear that I believe that we need to secure the southern border of the United States, and I've been disappointed in the previous administration's work on that. But it doesn't mean that that's sufficient. And we need to figure out how to create a system so that we support our farm workers and we support our producers and we don't lose these farms and ranches to Mexico, which is what's going to happen if we don't figure it out. So thank you for raising it, and I look forward to working with you and others, the farm workers, to address it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Hogan.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank both of you for your work in helping us at year end with the year extension and particularly with the disaster assistance. You both were very important in that effort, and I want to publicly acknowledge that and thank you. And it's very important that we got it done. Based on both of your opening remarks, I don't know how anybody could not be aware that to get the new Farm Bill done, we need affordable crop insurance and updated reference prices in ARC and PLC. Would both of you agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Updated prices in ARC and PLC. Would both of you adamantly agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Regarding tariffs, in the first round, President Trump used tariffs to try to negotiate better trade deals for not just farmers and ranchers, but for manufacturers too. And the Chinese did retaliate, and we put in place through our Ag Appropriations Committee, the Market Facilitation Program. And ultimately, President Trump was able to negotiate a $50 billion deal for agriculture. And I think, Mr. Duvall, you referenced how prices were good up until 2022, and they've declined precipitously since then. So, in regard to tariffs, what kind of strategy would you advise the administration undertaking? You know, what advice would you give Brooke Rollins and our trade ambassador and the administration, President Trump, in terms of how best to undertake that negotiation from an ag perspective? And remember, we want fair markets, free markets, but we want fair markets, and we don't have fair markets. Other countries take advantage of us, and we need to deal with it, and the president intends to do that.
And that's exactly what we support, access and fair markets. You know, we have the perfect example of what happened during COVID. We have a supply system that supplies food to this country from our farms to our forks. And any interruption in that system is going to cause tremendous problems at all levels, all lengths of that chain, any interruption. And so we just can't afford to do that. So during COVID, we said that the workers in the food system was essential. What's essential mean? We got to have it, so you got to find some way to exempt it out of it so we don't interrupt it. I grow chickens for a living. When they deliver that chicken, they already know what day is going to be harvested and where it's going to go. If you interrupt that system, it hurts everything between me and the fork. We cannot afford it. Our people won't stand for it in this country, and agriculture needs to be identified as an essential, not agriculture, but the food system, which includes agriculture, needs to be identified as an essential part of our everyday lives for every American across this country.
Mr. Larew?
Yeah, thank you for the question, because I think it's a really important one right now. And certainly the message that we shared the last time we had the tariffs in place, and that we would share again, is everyone knows that China is a bad actor in this. And even as the administration was able to kind of achieve the phase one agreement and additional kind of benefits there, which were really encouraging, we know that they end up falling back on a lot of those promises. And so we would certainly encourage, wherever possible, that the U.S., who is not alone in having a poor trading relationship with China, to work with allies, to come together to try to address a lot of those challenges. That said, if we know that retaliation is imminent, making sure that through examples that you said with the market facilitation loan, that we already have plans in place should we reach that point of retaliation or impact directly on the farms, so that, much to Zippy's point here, that there is certainty, that there's continuity out there, because too much is at stake to have that disruption.
So I think that's an important point there. And so I would emphasize and again ask both of you, both in terms of the disaster assistance and then also whatever programs we need to make sure we keep our farmers in the game while we go through these negotiations to get them better access to markets, that we can work closely with you, with the associations, not only Farmers Union and Farm Bureau, but all the commodity groups as we go through that process, and your commitment to work together on that.
We would welcome it. Thanks.
And that is our job. Our job is not to be critical of one party or the other, or one president, administration, or other president. It's our job to be the voice of the farmers across this country, and to express the concerns of policies that are being considered. Is our job to do that. And I know my friend here and I are committed to make sure that we express those concerns, and we'll express congratulations when we accomplish something.
And be helpful in the process.
Yes, sir. We look forward to working with that.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Senator Smith.
Well, thank you, Chair Bozeman and Ranking Member Klobuchar, and welcome both of you to our panel. I think the last time I saw both of you, we were on another panel together at Farm Fest in Minnesota last rainy August, so it's good to see you again. And I also just want to take a moment to welcome Mr. Tim Deal to the committee today. He's a fourth-generation Minnesota farmer and is on the MNDAC Sugar Beet Cooperative Board and is here today with the American Sugar Beet Growers. So So welcome to the committee. And I also just want to associate myself with the comments that have been made by the ranking member and others about the crucial importance of getting on top of issues around farm labor and, of course, the trade conversation we're having. I think it's just vitally important. But I want to focus, if I can, for a minute on, I've got to tell you, I'm just really concerned about the Trump administration, DOGE, federal employee buyout and hiring freeze that's happening and what impact that will have on USDA, impact on the food and ag sector, access to disaster assistance, risk management tools, and ultimately how this could hurt consumers. And for example, just this morning, we heard reports about food safety inspectors taking the federal employee buyout, which could result in not having enough inspectors in Minnesota meat processing facilities. You know, understanding Minnesota is a huge producer in the country. And another example, you know, we've had a lot of reports from Minnesotans and I think around the country about challenges with staffing at FSA and the NRCS staff at the local offices and what a barrier that is to farmers getting access, having a trusted partner to help them navigate and get the assistance that they need. So I want to just note that last year I worked with Senator Ricketts with the USDA to get some recommendations back on what we could do to do better there, and got some good recommendations back. So that's a start in the right direction, but I don't want to lose that momentum. So I'm wondering, could each of you comment briefly on what impact staff reductions in local USDA offices would have on your farmer members, given these offices are already understaffed?
Well, it's already occurring right now. There's a lot of uncertainty out there in those county offices, and in spite of the fact that we are the envy of the world in having those USDA personnel in those county offices, that direct connection to farmers and ranchers for the important USDA programs. Staffing and the continuity of those operations is a challenge in the best of times, I think, as you were saying. And right now, that's just being exacerbated. We're even hearing the return to office. We don't have folks who even have an office
That's
to
right.
come back to.
Haven't had office for years. This has nothing to do with COVID.
That's right. We're hearing those stories, and just, you know, one thing that we are leaning into is the fact that the National Farmers Union signed a memorandum of understanding with USDA toward the latter part of last year to look and evaluate at staffing opportunities, if you will, into the future, ways to make service better and improved. That doesn't necessarily mean additional staff, but making sure that the programs that we depend on can function.
Exactly, exactly. Mr. Duvall, if you'd like to comment briefly on this, and I'm hoping to get in another question.
Sure, I'll do it quickly. The last two secretaries, Secretary Perdue and Secretary Vilsack, I had extensive conversations about the lack of help in our county offices. And as far as your meat packing inspectors, we have farmers that want to go directly to consumers, but they have to schedule their meat pack processing 2 years out. You understand the cow's going to carry the calf for 9 months. 2 years out to be able to get a kill date and harvest date, and that is not a good situation. So this is just going to compound that situation.
Yeah, thank you. So I appreciated also you both bringing up the challenges of new and beginning farmers getting into the business, this giant generational transfer that is undergoing. And I also note, Mr. Larew, you talking about how it is that in this country today, farmers are keeping only about 15 cents out of every food dollar, and are often in the position of buying or selling from monopolies. And I mean, I think these things are all related. I mean, one of the reasons it's hard to get into farming is because of the concentration. One of the reasons that farmers are not making a good income is because they're just not in a strong market position compared to these large conglomerates that are dictating prices, not only from how much they're paying for input costs, but as well as how much they're going to get for that turkey or beef. This is something I really respect Senator Grassley for his work on this. I know that this is very important and is an issue of bipartisan interest. So in the I guess, no minutes left I have, maybe if you could just briefly comment on how you see your members being affected by this market consolidation.
Oh, it's across the board. I mean, certainly there were opportunities as a result of that consolidation, and that includes things for direct-to-consumer, as Zippy was noting here.
Yes, and you're exactly right. The pressures that are on small, medium-sized farms, and you recognize yourself, with the advantages of being large, you can buy things cheaper, the pressures even more. And the American people love medium, small-sized family farms, and that's what they want to exist and want to be able to buy their commodities from. And time we put a regulation in or something like this, it makes it more difficult for them to stay on their farms.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Senator Grassley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you folks for attending. And Mr. Zippy, I've been a member of the Farm Bureau since 1956. Before I ask any of you questions, I got a short statement. Over the last 4 years, American crop farmers had a year or two of record high net cash farm income, so profitability for maybe 1/4 of that period of time. Unfortunately, American farmers have also had to face years of record high inflation under an administration that was largely deaf to farmers' needs. In 23 and 24, net cash farm income dropped dramatically. In other words, row crop farmers losing money. The stagnant trade policies, lack of ambition to find new markets for commodities, and overregulation of the Biden administration caught up with farmers. Many family farmers in Iowa have faced machinery and land payments with high interest rates farmers haven't seen in decades while dealing with steep downturn in commodity prices. Now, it seems to me that this trend will continue until new markets are created for agricultural products. My first question deals with packers and stockyards. I understand this hearing is focused mostly upon crop commodities, but I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you about the poultry grower payment system and capital improvement system rule that was finalized under Secretary Vilsack. I think the rule is badly needed. This rule is meant to provide more transparency for poultry producers under the tournament system and give farmers a fair shake in contracts. So to you, Mr. Duvall, and I'll have a little different question to Mr. Larew on this subject. Can you speak to how this rule may positively affect producers' bottom line?
Thank you, Senator, and I am a poultry producer for 37 years now, and I've experienced every good and bad event that could happen in the integrated system. We have a system that we describe, and I have heard secretaries of agriculture describe as nothing more than a modern-day sharecrop farming system, and we know how that turned out years and years ago. It was not good. We need transparency in the system. We need, our farmers need that tournament pay to be changed so that they have a base pay, not only for them, but their bankers that are depending on them to make payments and their families depending on them to make a living. And that transparency will help us understand. What people don't understand about animal agriculture, especially in integrated system, when that chicken is delivered to me on my farm, there are 3 things that go into how it really performs. One is the environment that it lives in, and that's my responsibility, and I have computers and people making sure that it's perfect all the time. Matter of fact, my wife always accused me of taking better care of my chickens than I did my children because they were warmer. Second is the quality of feed. I have absolutely no control over it. Third, and all of us deal with animal agriculture, understand how important genetics is. We have absolutely no control over genetics. So 2 of the 3 legs that determine how that chicken's going to perform is not controlled by the farmer, and he should have the transparency to understand what's behind that chicken, because we all know in animal agriculture it depends on the age of the mother, how they're taken care of, and the quality of the genetics.
Mr. Larew, I come a little bit different on this same subject to you. Could you speak to how changing or removing pieces of this rule may negatively impact poultry producers? I'm not
I'm only raising that question because there might be something coming down the road when you have a new administration.
Well, certainly, we think that the rules should continue to stay in place. I think that, to your point here, much kind of building on Zippy's question here, bringing certainty, bringing transparency is absolutely crucial. I think that there are ideas and ways to continue to improve not only contract growers' issues here in poultry, but other sections of the Packers and Stockyards Act that also have room for improving. When we look at transparency, that is true not only in poultry, but also needed sorely across the rest of livestock.
My time's up, but I'm going to submit questions for answer in writing, but just want to make one final point that I hope you can work hard for E15 year-round nationwide, because that's going to help commodity prices more than probably a lot of things we can do here. Thank you, Mr.
Happy to support.
We most certainly will.
Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, the ranking member, for holding this hearing today and for our witnesses joining us today as well. Mr. Duvall, on its website, the Farm Bureau describes Title IV nutrition programs as, quote, reaching all levels of the supply chain from the farmer's growing produce to the grocery store employee who puts it on the shelf, end quote. Mr. Duvall, do you agree that federal dollars invested in the nutrition title of the Farm Bill have a positive economic impact on farmers who grow the food being purchased using these dollars?
I do.
Mr. Duvall, I just want to take a minute to talk about the history of the Farm Bill. Since a nutrition title was first added to the Farm Bill in 1973, the year after I was born, farmers, anti-hunger advocates, Democrats, and Republicans all have come together consistently to pass a Farm Bill that ensures the food grown by our farmers makes it onto the plates of Americans. Unfortunately, there are proposals being considered now that would undermine decades of success and disrupt the broad bipartisan coalition that has historically been the key to passing a Farm Bill. Mr. Duvall, would proposals to cut nutrition programs through budget reconciliation, a move that would impact the baseline of the Farm Bill, impede the ability of Congress to pass a Farm Bill that meets our needs in farm country and supports American families?
Your question is, would it impede it? I would think that would be a difficult conversation, and I think that is the conversation y'all will be having. Of course, it's our job to represent all of Farm Bill. We do know the benefits, and we do support the nutrition program, but we also know that there's a way smaller percentage that goes to helping support our food system through farmers to make sure that it gets from one season to the other, and that has been way too long of getting some attention of broadening the baseline, where my comment started in the beginning.
Where I'll agree, Mr. Duvall, is that there needs to be support for our farmers and ranchers and food producers all across America.
Yes, sir.
There's also been a grand bargain, if you will, to work with colleagues in all sides of this to say we should support our farmers and ranchers and we should support nutrition programs.
Nutrition programs were designed to give people a hand up in difficult times in their life, and we support that.
Amen to that, sir. I appreciate that. Americans wake up with fresh produce on their tables and cold milk in the fridges due to the hard work and dedication of this country's farm workers as well. These workers are an integral part of our country's agricultural economy and work every day to feed families across America. The response to that sacrifice has been relentless attacks by this president and others in his administration due to some of their efforts as we see going on right now. I've raised this with Ms. Brooke Rollins, who I believe will be the next Secretary of Agriculture for the United States of America as well. Now, Mr. Duvall, yes or no, did you know that the USDA estimates that roughly half of the workforce is undocumented?
Yes, sir. Our number is 40%.
Do you think our farmers, ranchers, and agricultural operations who depend on that labor will survive when roughly half of the workforce is unavailable?
First, I'd like to say our farmers want a system that they can work within the law.
Amen.
and have a consistent workforce that is reliable so that they can deliver their crops on time, good quality. And your question.
What, Mr. Duvall, what happens if, I'll use your number, what happens if 40% of the workforce for farmers and ranchers disappears?
It would be devastating to agriculture. You would see farms go out of business, and we could see interruption in our food system like we saw in COVID.
I appreciate that, sir. And this is an area, Mr. Chairman, I think that, we can work on. There's one of the strongest bipartisan bills that came out of the House recently was with farm workers, with agriculture, with finding a way to get that done. Unfortunately, we didn't get it through the Senate, but it's one of those strong tools that I believe that we could look at as well. And make sure that we have a stronger system. And we can do it at the same time by investing in border security. We can have strong border security. We can fix a broken immigration system. We can do this in a bipartisan way. First attention should be to what's going to happen to farmers and ranchers when it comes to lowering costs for the American people when it comes to food, when it comes to making sure that our farmers and ranchers are going to have the tools that they need to be able to grow those crops, collect those crops, keep them strong, keep them moving as well. So I look forward to that as well. And appreciate this hearing, appreciate your time for being here to our witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. We have so many witnesses that some of you I've already met with. We certainly appreciate you taking your time to come to Capitol Hill because you are truly helping us help you. So I want to tell you how grateful I am for that. As we know, it is no secret that the U.S. economy and farming is headed in a dark direction right now. The U.S. farm economy. The 23 crop year was bad, 24 was horrendous, and the upcoming crop year is not looking very pretty as well. Farm income has dropped roughly $41 billion over the last 2 years. The worst decline we have ever seen, and our trade deficit is expected to reach a record high of $45.5 billion for fiscal year 2025. This is the deficit that we're looking at. And we used to brag about our trade surplus. And we are certainly not in that position right now. Input costs are through the roof while crop prices are lower today than they were 15 years ago. The federal farm safety net is not providing adequate support to keep our farmers and ranchers afloat. And I have certainly been pulling the alarm on this because I know the seriousness of this. But because of this, producers across the country are literally going out of business. And in short, U.S. agriculture is just in trouble. But when U.S. agriculture is in trouble, when the farms are in trouble, the banks, the retailers, the equipment dealerships, grain buyers, the gins, the textile mill, the transportation business, but more importantly, those who are most in trouble are the ones we feed. The rural America is definitely in a crisis mode, and partly because Congress has yet to come to terms with the fact that commodity support programs under Title I of the Farm Bill are inadequate. And they are in desperate need of improving, and they have been for a long time. Title I of the Farm Bill, which is the vital component of the farm safety net, accounts for, listen to this, roughly 5% of the Farm Bill baseline. 5%. That is all. So when folks say that we need more farm in the Farm Bill, this is what they're talking about. It is just so essential that we let Americans know the problems that we have and the seriousness of this. We all know that when you stop production, if you shut down all the production on the West Coast of the produce, if you shut down the slaughter facilities of poultry, of our beef packing plants, if you shut down the combines for 30 days, we would have enough food to feed this country for maybe 30 days. Its consumption is consistent, constantly eating every day of what we're trying to provide, so we have to provide it every day. We are the ones that feed you. Mr. Duvall, would you agree with me that commodity support programs under Title I deserve significant improvement and significant investment?
I would agree with that, Senator.
And the U.S. farm economy would be in a different place right now if Congress had made these proper investments and enacted a new farm bill a year ago. Would you agree with me on that?
Totally agree with that.
And that Congress should invest in Title I programs in the next farm bill as soon as possible to prevent today's problems that we are experiencing to get even worse than what they are.
Would agree with that, too.
And Mr. Duvall, as you know, agriculture is Mississippi's #1 industry and primary economic driver in our state, as we have discussed earlier in many states. But I've recently been hearing that stakeholders across Mississippi and the country are concerned about their future access to crop protection tools and biotechnology products. Without these, Mississippi farmers from all the states that are represented here today, we cannot produce a viable crop. Farmers in the South are subject to some of the most notorious insects and weeds in the whole world, and they have to overcome this once considered impossible, thanks to these amazing scientific innovations that the Bureau of Plant Industry at Mississippi State University, there's so many strides that have been made. In my lifetime, I've seen yields increase 400% because of these strides. We cannot stop this. This is national security. You think a country will fight a war over oil, you let them get hungry. And it's our jobs to do that. And I so appreciate the diligence both of you impress on me that your determination to do that, because we're definitely in this together. We've got everybody has to be on board. In your testimony, you mentioned the importance of sound risk-based science when it comes to approaching crop protection tools. Will you please elaborate on that and just how much is it at risk if we abandon a science-based approach to regulating crop protection tools and the biotechnology?
It is absolutely critical that we continue to have faith in the system that provides the science-based tools that we use on our farm. 1 out of 10,000 products makes it to market. 1 out of 10,000. It takes almost 11 years to get a product to the market. They got 350 scientists at EPA or whichever department it is, making sure that those things are safe. And our farmers apply it according to the label, because they own, live, and grow their families and work on that farm where they're applying those crop protection products. So no one is going to do anything to hurt their own family, let alone someone else's, and the land that they invested generations and generations into improving it. And if you could look at my farm today versus what it was when my grandfather bought it, which was ditches and gullies and kudzu growing on it because of the things we didn't do right during cotton, when cotton was king, you would see that for decades, our farmers and ranchers have done the right thing to regenerate their soils, because mine is a rolling green hill where cows graze now, and they've done the right things to grow more with less. They've done the right things to use less crop protection tools to grow more. And everything that we've done has been good for the consumer, for the farm, the land, and also for the environment.
Thank you so much for your answer, and God bless the farmer. And Mr. Welch, I believe you're up.
Thank you very much. And much of what you said, Senator Hyde-Smith, I totally agree with. I am so impressed with your testimony. And what's so interesting to me is so many of the things that you said, if we had two farmers from Vermont, they'd be saying the same thing. And the other thing that I think is an opportunity for this committee, we all care on this committee, both sides of the aisle, about rural America. You know, Vermont, they're dairy farming, vegetable farming, it's the backbone. And those of us who don't farm benefit by those who do farm. And I just want to express my appreciation. We have an opportunity in this divided country by focusing on the needs of agriculture in each of our areas to try to bring us together, because we all do value the farm activity that is different in Vermont than West Virginia or in Georgia. So I just want to go through a few questions. Number one, the right to repair. How in the world, farmers are really good at fixing things. Why can't they just fix whatever it is they can fix? So I support right to repair. How about you? That brings costs down, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's cost not only in terms of equipment and the parts and labor for that, but also the time that is often lost in harvest and delays and getting into
So
repairs.
let me just make a point. You know, the commodity price that we have to deal with in order to make sure there's a safety net is one side. But if we can bring the cost down, that helps as well, right? Because the input costs are less.
Absolutely.
All right, number two, tariffs. One of you was talking about potash. We had a meeting in Vermont, and that's what they talked about. One of our grain suppliers, who really works very closely with the farmers, they're going to get hammered if the price of that goes up, and we get most of it from Canada. So my view on tariffs is do no harm. That should be the starting policy. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. We're already seeing the effects.
Yeah, we just shouldn't do that to our hardworking farmers. Also, my understanding is the last time we had tariffs, a lot of our Midwest farmers lost market share to Brazil. That hasn't come back. Do you see that as a possibility that could happen again?
Very much so.
Yes.
All right, well, also, you all talked about how hard it is for young farmers to get involved, and that's certainly true in Vermont. The cost, everything is really, really difficult. We've introduced a bill on farm ownership, the Farm Ownership Improvement Act, and what it would do is allow for pre-approval and pre-qualification process that is in the Farm Ownership Improvement Act that benefits farmers who are starting. You get this pre-approval, it cuts the red tape. Does that make sense to you as an option?
We're definitely in support.
Well, I appreciate that. And another thing, the Weather Act. We are getting wild weather. I know you've had it in West Virginia and Georgia. We've certainly had it in Vermont. Big floods in July of 23, July of 24. Crops got wiped out. We have to have an insurance program. These are vegetable, by and large, where the hassles that these farmers had to go through, they had to account for like each type of vegetable. Carrots, how many onions did you use? How many radishes did you lose? And they went by wholesale price when all these farmers sell at farmers market at retail. Don't you think it's time to change that?
Definitely.
Yes.
Well, you guys are doing a great job, I got to say. And my hope is that Senator Marshall and I have worked together on a lot of things, including this. But we've got to take the rhetoric out here. Like, for instance, farm labor you mentioned, immigration, big issue, very controversial, very political. But you know what's very simple? If you don't have farm labor in Vermont, you don't milk the cows. And you don't. So you're with us on trying to do something that gives stability for farm labor so that our farmers who absolutely have to have that labor are able to get the job done, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Well, thank you. You know, another thing, I'm going to say this is Black History Month, and I just want to celebrate it. And I know there's a lot of young black farmers who'd like to get back on the land. Many families, especially in the South, as you know, did lose the foothold that they had. So my hope is that will include folks who've lost their land through historical reasons. So I won't ask you to comment, but I know you know any young farmer is a farmer we want to get on the land. Would you both agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I got to say I appreciate hearing from you. You know, I do think the work you're doing has the potential for us to unify and do things that get farmers stronger and our rural communities stronger. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you. I look forward to working with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Welch. Well, good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. It's kind of lonely up here today. Everyone is out voting, and I'm sure more will come back in a moment. But, Mr. Duvall, I want to talk about farmer mental health for a second and farmer suicide. This is something near and dear to my heart for many reasons. Over the past several years, we try to go out in the communities, doing roundtables, trying to connect the dots. The resources are out there to help. And I want to back up and just say to all my farmers and ranchers, the pressure is very real. The pressure is very real. The pressure of losing a 5th, 6th, 7th generation farm, to be that person that couldn't keep the farm together and the family, that's an immense amount of pressure. And then I think then I wanted to talk about solutions. And I know American Farm Bureau has been out here trying to connect these dots as well and the resources, and appreciate the education programs you're doing with the farmers. I'm trying to work with lenders out there. The lenders were some of the first people to see the signs and symptoms of depression, and I think we're making progress, but it's still tough times in ag land. So Mr. Duvall, maybe speak just a second about farmer suicide and what American Farm Bureau is trying to do to help us out in this situation.
Sure. Our organizations have worked arm in arm to try to bring awareness to this. You know, this is a difficult subject to talk about. It really is. But we did a survey in the Georgia, Florida area, and the alarming fact that we heard is that young farmers that farmed, and I'll try to get you the statistics correctly because I'm going off memory, I think less than 10 years, that 50% of them had considered suicide in that 10 years. 50%. And you know, I'm a crusty old farmer, and when my wife died, yeah, I bottled it all up inside, like crusty old farmers do, and they say, we don't talk about our feelings. Well, I was wrong. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay not to talk about it. And we got to get rid of the stigma that goes along with it. And the only way to do that is to talk to farmers, make farmers and the families aware, to be noticeable of what's going around, just like you're working with the farm credit system, because they see them every day. Yeah. There's a farmer in Minnesota, him and his sons ate breakfast one morning together before they went to church. They came back from church, ate lunch together. They talked about some of the issues, financial issues of the farm, and before the son went down, the dad had taken his life.
Goodness.
That cannot continue to happen.
Yeah.
It is a disaster.
You know, I just encourage everybody to be a good neighbor. Most of us notice when our neighbor suddenly is not going to church, or they're not going to a ball game, and there's some of those very subtle hints out there that we're all aware of.
And sometimes all it takes is a text message, or go by and pick him up, take him for a cup of coffee, and open up your ears and let them talk. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah, being a good neighbor. Mr. Larew, in your testimony, you talked about farmers selling to monopolies. How do we put farmers back in control? And then what else can we do to give the farmer more options? I'm sure you've thought about this.
Yeah, absolutely, and I really appreciate the question because the challenges are very real out there. If we look at those who are raising cattle to selling to the beef market right now, it's a whole combination of things, right? It's making sure that first, we're not doing any harm in terms of our trading relations, making sure that we have the existing resources out there for slaughter and processing continue so that market flow continues. But at the end of the day, we still have a highly concentrated beef market, for example, and this is true across agriculture, where the opportunity for collusion and manipulation of the market is too great. And so whatever we can do to reinforce the laws on the books, not necessarily seeking new laws to enforce our antitrust regulations, and then to also make sure that the Packers and Stockyards Act is truly serving the needs of our farmers and ranchers out there. I think those are great places to start. We're also starting to invest in additional processing and marketing opportunities. So it's a combination of things along the line.
Great. One thing we have pushed for is to allow beef to be sold across state lines with the state inspection, and trying to provide farmers and ranchers with easier access to the markets as well. So go ahead, Zippy. You got a comment, it looks like.
And also, in the world of technology, there's got to be a better, more efficient way of doing it rather than the way we're doing it, and make sure that that availability is out there. These small, medium-sized packing houses are under huge pressure to be able to make a profit, just like the farmers are. And as they get in those positions, they tend to go out of business, and then that takes it away from the farmers to be able to utilize it. And if they become a threat to a larger packer, they just buy them.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we need to turn to the senior senator from the great state of Kansas, Senator Moran.
Thank you. Nice of you to recognize me, Senator Marshall. I am pleased to be here in my debut hearing as a newest, most junior member of the Senate Committee on Agriculture, and I appreciate the opportunity to be back fully engaged in this arena. I just want to to raise a couple of things. I would like for you to highlight for the committee and for the administration, for the new secretary, something that we've highlighted to her and others as recently as this morning with conversations with USDA personnel. But the quick implementation of disaster assistance, just a reminder of why that matters. And it's a matter of, needs to be a matter of days and a week or so, not a matter of months or longer. Please briefly tell me why that's important.
Well, one, we need the secretary placed in her position, and we look forward to that, because the sooner we do that, the sooner we get it out. It is absolutely critical we do this because we have been put in this situation because we do not have a modernized 5-year farm bill. It's been kicked down the road 2 years. We appreciate the extension, but it's not going to solve the problem.
We've already talked about the economic challenges out there that are ongoing, not only looking back. So the need to get that rolled out as quickly as possible is actually paramount. Absolutely.
My next comment may not be a question, but it is something I want to highlight that you both indicated. That you, I think it was you, Mr. President, I guess that doesn't limit the scope of who I'm talking about. The Farm Bureau President, Mr. Duvall, representation not just of farmers, representation of the communities they live in, rural America. I mean, I really think this is hugely important to the country as well as to the people who want to raise their families in a place that, well, we all call home. And I would highlight just the things that we face that you will have policy positions and puts on. We've talked about tariffs. We've talked about disaster assistance, the tax provisions. Zippy, you mentioned those in your opening statement, the continuation of those provisions, a new farm bill. That just has huge consequences on farmers, obviously. But that's the result of our decisions and outcomes of those debates determine whether or not my hospital doors stay open, there are kids in our schools, whether or not the grocery store exists. For a long time, I've indicated that where I come from, economic development is often whether or not there's a grocery store in town, and that requires, when you say that sentence, a lot of explanation. Well, why would that be? But in the absence of farmers, we lose community banks, grocery stores, the hospital. Those things are important. It suggests to me that we need to have a complete focus on how do we get commodity prices up in addition to getting input costs down. And I would indicate that renewable fuels is an important aspect of this. We are fully engaged in trying to pursue and implement SAF, renewable aviation fuel. Trade agreements, you both have mentioned. I would welcome your input on what countries stand out to you that are prime for us to reach a bilateral trade agreement with. And I'll pause there for that answer.
First one that comes to mind is India and the Asian Pacific Rim.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think, I think implied by your question is also making sure that those existing markets that we have that we rely so heavily on are not lost.
That's a good point. Occasionally I'll have someone in Kansas, a farmer perhaps, who indicates, let's take care of ourselves, and I'm all for doing that. But taking care of ourselves in the case of agriculture means trade, exports, it means markets. My answer has been sometimes, so what 40% of acres in Kansas do you not want to plant and harvest? Because we produce more than we can consume, and therefore all the opportunities we need for exports, all the opportunities we need for trade, all the opportunities we need to utilize the commodity outcome, the output into other products, including renewable fuels, become all the more important. What am I missing?
Well, yes, we do need to take care of ourselves, but if we don't produce that 20% of our income comes from exports, what we do when we have a bad year? Are we going to just fall short if we just produce for ourselves and that's all? So it is critical that we maintain those trade treaties out there because it's a big part of our income and it stabilizes our system in case of emergency.
And maybe just kind of stepping additionally on top of that, those domestic opportunities, whether it's investing in those communities with value-added products such as biofuels and so forth, those domestic market opportunities have to be continually invested in as well.
Thank you. Finally, my conversation with USDA this morning, along with the chairman of this committee and the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture, dealt with what we believe to be true is that $560 million worth of food commodities is sitting in ports, awaiting the ability to be moved to places where people are starving. And while there is certainly a moral component to food aid, I thought it might be valuable for you to remind me if there's a value to farmers. I remember in the last Trump administration, I was driving through Kensington, Kansas, grain sorghum piled on Railroad Avenue. Kensington's a town of a few hundred people, elevator along Railroad Avenue, and the grain piled on the ground was as high as the elevator. We need, in addition to trade and exports, what role does food aid play in helping farmers have a better outcome in their economics?
Any food aid helps in that economic picture for farmers. And it is important to realize that we support efficiencies. We want it done in an efficient way and not be wasteful. But we also got to think about the sustainability of our world. You know, I've had the opportunity to have a general son marry into my family, and he's retired now, but I remember distinctly having a conversation with him, and he says, what you do brings more sustainability to this world than anything else, because when people get hungry, they get mean and mad, and they get jealous of our country that has everything available to them because of the food system.
Our members certainly recognize both the humanitarian need for that food aid, but also the impact that it can have in terms of bringing stability to our own markets and so forth, and particularly now with a lot of pressure on a lot of those commodities. Some of those commodities are at risk should there be major disruptions here to falling even further.
Thank you both.
Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for holding this hearing. As everyone in this room knows, the state of agriculture economy is in dire straits. We're in trouble. It's not getting much better. Our farmers are struggling. Producers have lost over $40 billion in net farm income since 2022, and the current agriculture trade deficit is $45.5 billion. We cannot stay on that same track. Producers in my state of Alabama and across the country are producing bumper crops, but they can't break even, much less make a profit due to low commodity prices and high input costs, interest rates, and inflation. It's been 13 years since reference prices for Title I commodities have been updated, yet the cost of production are not what they were 13 years ago. In fact, they are 30 to 40% higher. Our farmers need a new farm bill with a strong and reliable farm safety net to support producers amidst fluctuating market conditions, natural disasters, and skyrocketing production costs. The $10 billion in economic assistance Congress passed in December was a crucial lifeline to keep some producers afloat, and we need to ensure it is implemented quickly. Mr. Duvall, in your testimony, you discussed the importance of extending the expiring provisions of President Trump's 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to keep farmers in business. Can you discuss the tax provisions that our producers rely upon the most?
Yes, sir, I can. One, it provided for a reduced tax rate. Most of our farmers 98% of them are operating on our pass-through entities, and that's important to them. Section 199A is important to them very much because it preserves that 20% business income deduction. Section 179 also needs to be continued. It's called bonus depreciation. It allows our farmers to reinvest in their business so they can meet the goals that the country has for us, whether it be conservation, climate, whatever it might be, soil health. We have to have that bonus depreciation. And then, of course, the last one, when we spoke about young farmers and beginning farmers, estate taxes. Estate taxes, it needs to be eliminated. It needs to be eliminated so that we can continue to pass our farms on for generations to come and make sure we bring some stability to our system, our food system. And this is something people sweat blood to pay for. It's their land, their home, and they want to keep it in production. And there's so many pressures on that land staying in production. It's just unreal, and this pressure makes it unbelievable when a family person dies and you have to sell part of the farm to pay the taxes. And what does that do? It takes it out of production, puts it into houses or solar panels or whatever, and it never comes back to agriculture.
Thank you. Bonus depreciation, estate taxes, my phone rings off the wall, and we need to listen to it, and I'm sure the rest of the senators are the same. Mr. Duvall, the agriculture trade deficit, as just said, is $45.5 billion. It's shameful. America has the best farmers and producers in the world. What suggestions do you have to improve ag trade and close the gap?
We got to have new agreements. We got to open up the market. We can compete with anybody in the world as long as we're allowed to use innovation and the research that is coming to our farms. It keeps us on cutting edge. And as long as our farmers are led by voluntary market-based programs, we will do anything this country asks us to do if it's led in that direction. And we have proven that in conservation by putting over 140 million acres into conservation over the last few decades. And that's the size of California and New York State together.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think everyone in this room can agree that American farmers today face deeply difficult challenges from extreme weather events, never-ending labor shortages, and a looming trade war, just to name a few. These challenges come on top of a job that is inherently demanding and at times unforgiving. It's Congress' job to ensure that when farmers are faced with the worst-case scenario, they have the tools to weather the storm and eventually rebuild. And that's why Congress invests billions each year in federal crop insurance and disaster assistance programs. But while traveling throughout California, I've learned that many of our growers simply aren't eligible for the insurance or assistance that they need. California farmers are incredibly resilient, but they deserve our full support as well. Mr. Larew, can you speak to the challenges that that specialty crop growers face when it comes to accessing federal programs? And perhaps you both could address what steps you think Congress should take to expand access to risk management options for these particular growers?
Yeah, well, first of all, I might start with just the investment that has been really appreciated over the years by our specialty crop growers in research for not only opening up new markets, but also making sure that we are managing pest pressure and so forth. So that's been a really important investment that we would want to make sure continues going forward. But it is absolutely true that the current risk management tools are really limited for these high-value crops. It just doesn't often make sense, even when there is a policy available. So I do think whether it's growers in the Central Valley or it's fruit and vegetable growers across the country looking for additional ways to improve existing programs to make it work better for specialty crop growers is going to be an important part of making sure that all of our producers can manage the risk.
Yes, and I agree with Rob here, and I'll reiterate that any farmer out there that's putting a crop in the land and depending on the good Lord to give him the things to grow it with, and with the markets like they are, deserves to have some risk management program. Now, the difficulty comes of making it very complicated. And the smaller the farm it is, the more complicated it is, the more difficult it is. It needs to be simplified for those people. A lot of people are just not going to go do it because it's just too difficult. They're in the field working. And these are a lot of these farm to table, farm to market people, and they deserve a shot to be able to have that risk management tool too.
Well, I appreciate that very much. I was visiting citrus growers in the Central Valley just this past weekend. We talked about a number of issues, including the one I raised, but we also talked about how California citrus groves are being affected by the bacterial infection called HLB. This has obviously been devastating to citrus growers in Florida and elsewhere. It was interesting for me to learn about the work that's being done, the research that's being done, the investment that's being made in a certain species of wasp that is a natural predator to the insects responsible for spreading this disease. This is a great part of the solution, And I wonder if you both could address how investments in agriculture research are also key to making sure that the farming community succeeds.
Yes, sir. Whether it's through our land grant institutions or through USDA agencies themselves, it may be safe to say we can't overinvest in research. And I think you just hit on a couple of key points to drive home, and that is not only those kind of existing pests, but emerging threats as well. And so whether it's looking for ways to combat that and making sure that we are innovative in our approach, that investment is critically important, and making sure that we're removing barriers wherever possible.
Totally agree with what he had to say, everything he said. But you know, the alarming thing to me is if we look around the world, in comparison to China, they're spending $3 to our one in research and development. Research and development and innovation keeps us on the cutting edge and being able to keep our food system supply secure.
Well, I thank both you gentlemen, and Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you to make sure that the specialty crop farmers can access insurance and assistance, that we keep the marketing programs strong and well-funded, but that we also continue that investment in research. We could easily lose billions to these bacteria, and an investment of millions in research to save billions in crops is a really good investment. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and yield back.
No, thank you, and those are excellent points. Okay, so have you done? Okay, good. Thank you all for being here. This has been excellent. So let's take a second and get our second panel up. You guys are discharged.
Can we say thank you again?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And all of you are invited to our national convention next year in Anaheim to celebrate a new farm bill that you're going to pass.
Very good.
Next convention is you. I don't think we'll have a farm bill by then.
No, but bless your heart. Bless your heart. I'm glad mine's behind me.